going to introduce our host. If you were here for the Resilience in Retirement webinar, which was a lot of fun, then you'll recognize our host. This is Tamara Statz, who is going to talk today about resilience, coping with chronic and terminal illness. So I'm going to pass it off. Thank you so much for coming back and chatting with the group. We really appreciate it.
Always. Thanks, Sarah. Just like last time, I'm like, wow, those events sound wonderful. I love Zumba. Who doesn't love Zumba? All those sound great and super important. I do have people ask about like, how am I supposed to age when I don't have children, I don't have nieces, etc. So super important topics. Well, if you saw me before, hello, good to see you again. My name's Tamara, as Sarah mentioned. We're going to talk about some strategies for coping with chronic and terminal illness as we age. I love a long title. I've learned this about myself. I love a long title. I love when it has a colon. Even better if I can sneak some sort of like really poignant quote in there, but I didn't in this one. If you joined me, us last time, you heard a bit about resilience, kind of at a foundational level, and I'll go through that again here today, just in case you weren't here. So some of this might be familiar. Old hat, right? You've been here before. So what we're going to do together today, we're going to talk about chronic illness, terminal illness, resilience, and strategies, just like the title says. There will be a couple instances throughout the presentation where I pose a question to you, and you're welcome to chime in the chat. That can make it a little bit more back and forth. And then, of course, if you have questions that come up along the way, throw them in the Q&A, and then I'm going to hold questions. I'm going to do my best to hold questions till the very end. So that I can kind of just flow through this and then go to those at the very end. So it's kind of the lay of the land. So when we think about chronic illness, I think it's just kind of helpful to kind of define what in the world are we talking about, right? Okay, so broadly speaking, when we talk about chronic illness, we're talking about activities, conditions. There's already things coming in the chat. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's just Sarah. There we go. Got it. Resources in the chat. So conditions that last a year or more, right, and require ongoing medical attention or limit those activities of daily living. So our ability to be independent, feed ourselves, bathe ourselves, clothe ourselves, etc., or both. That's according to the CDC. So a condition that lasts more than a year needs ongoing medical attention. Come on, clicker. So what are the most common chronic illnesses as we age? So you can see these here in order. So concerns about blood pressure, cholesterol, arthritis, heart disease, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, heart failure, depression, Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, and then COPD. The good news is a lot of these are manageable, right? We have medications, we have interventions. There are ways that we can manage these and still live relatively well. This is just a visual version of that. So when we're thinking of, 65 plus in particular, 80% of folks 65 plus have at least one of these chronic conditions. That's a big deal. 68% have two or more of these, right? So people are living with some stuff going on as we age, some chronic conditions that we need to be managing. When we think about chronic illness, we can and do experience grief and loss throughout those experiences. So for someone who is chronically ill, they can feel a loss of control, right? Your body is doing things that you don't want it to do. And you can feel or, experience a very real loss of productivity if you're not able to maintain the same energy level or do the same things that you've maybe enjoyed. A loss of activities. I've had clients who are in their retirement and used to golf all the time, and now they're not able to stand for that long because of arthritis or hip issues. So they're not able to do the thing that they used to enjoy, which is connected to friends and friendship, right? And maintaining those connections. And so sometimes, you've probably found this, but when the going gets tough, sometimes friends stick around and show up and sometimes they don't. And so sometimes we lose friends along the way who can't be part of this journey with us. And you can feel a sense of a loss of self. Who am I now that I can't do these things that I used to be able to do? Now that I have to be, going to the doctor however often and managing this, And then some anticipatory grief, which is that experience of kind of pre-grieving, grieving something that hasn't happened yet, but you can see coming up. And so, when you have a chronic illness and kind of like are managing it with a physician, being able to know what might be ahead for that. What does long-term diabetes look like? What does long-term arthritis look like over the course of time, and your abilities and how they change? What does resilience look like with living with chronic illness? It looks like managing your diseases, right? A lot of what you're going to hear today is not going to be earth-shattering information that you've never heard before. Because the thing is that resilience is available to everyone. Resilience is something that we build. It's a muscle that we exercise. It's not something that is only given to a privileged few. It's not something that you're born with or not. It's not a dichotomy like that. It's something that we can cultivate. And so resilience sometimes is the boring stuff, right? It's managing the diseases. It's managing your blood sugar if you have diabetes. It's managing your blood pressure. It's taking those medications. It's checking in with your doctor. It's managing the stress that's in your life, which sometimes includes stressful friends, stressful family members, maybe a stressful living situation. It's maybe seeing a therapist if you're going through a lot of stress, having somebody to talk to. It's eating healthy. Again, it's the boring stuff we should all already be doing, chronic illness or not, right? Exercising. One of the things that I think is really important when we think about exercise, I really like this kind of different way of looking at it, is like, it's about movement, right? What if we expand it from exercising? We can tend to think like, oh, I have to be using weights, or I have to be on a treadmill, or I have to be doing a class or whatever. Like, what if it's just movement? What if walking the dog is exercise? Your heart rate might not get elevated. You might not sweat, but it's still movement. And so kind of, I invite us to like broaden our understanding of movement, really looking at it as movement. I don't like going to a gym. And so, but I've got this little 2-story house. Sometimes I go up and down my stairs, and that gets me, that's a stair stepper. It's a free stair stepper, right? And then I don't have to be around other sweaty people. I can just be in my own house. So that kind of gets me to do that sort of stuff. Sleeping enough. Sleep is a big deal. And so if you're noticing that you're not sleeping enough or not sleeping quality, can you do a sleep study? Can you get this looked at to see, like, is there a different tool that can help you sleep better? Because that helps your body be able to cope and process what's going on in it. And so keeping up with vaccinations, right? Preventive stuff, ongoing stuff, keeping up with regular doctor's appointments. How many people, we could all raise our hands and say, I know someone who never went to the doctor and then got really sick, and it's something that maybe we could have caught sooner. And that's not to shame people for not going to the doctor. There's a lot of reasons why people don't like going to the doctor. And maintaining those appointments and having, the opportunity to get in front of a physician or a nurse practitioner, et cetera, is so important. And then socialization, right? I think we maybe talked about this a little bit last time. I'm going to blur all of my presentations together in my brain now, but you don't have to suddenly become an extrovert when you become older. There can be kind of a perception of like, well, dad moved into an assisted living, so now why isn't he doing any of the activities? And it's like, well, what did he like to do before? Well, he liked to be by himself. Well, he probably still gonna like being by himself, so maybe that's okay. So when we say regular socialization, take it with a grain of salt, right? Do what's right for you. It doesn't mean you suddenly have to become an extrovert and love being around groups and do bingo all the time. It just means like maybe paying attention to if you feel like you're isolating yourself. Having that support system is really important. Kind of like moving into terminal illness then. So the definition of a terminal illness, so that's an illness or condition that cannot be cured, right? We're heading in one direction, we're not going back, is likely to lead to someone's death. And sometimes we call these life-limiting illnesses as well. So there's a few different ways we can talk about it. So the most common terminal illnesses as we age, again, this is from the CDC: heart disease, cancers, COVID, Number 3, right? Just think about this, y'all. 3.5 years ago, it wasn't even on our radar at all. Cerebrovascular issues, Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, respiratory disease, diabetes, unintentional injury, kidney issues, influenza, and pneumonia. Oh, I thought I had another slide about this, but I don't. So those are the most common terminal illnesses as we age. So some of the ways that grief and loss can show up in terminal illness. So if we are experiencing this illness, it can feel very similar. You know, there's some overlap with chronic illness where there's a sense of a loss of control. Sometimes people say, you know, my body is betraying me. Productivity decline, right? Lack of being able to work maybe in the way that you wanted to or as much as you used to. Changes in activities, again, maybe changes in your friendships. Your relationship to self might be changing again. That anticipatory grief, especially when it's terminal illness, I think we can see at the end of the tunnel is ultimately our death. And so, you know, anticipating that can be really stressful, also really powerful, right? I am not a person who's prone to optimism. And so I try to bring a balance of realism and optimism to this particular presentation. I've done this one before. You know, that I will say the word death and not pass away. I will say the word died and not pass away. I think it's okay to talk about them in the firm terms and not kind of use euphemisms. And so sometimes when you're experiencing terminal illness, you might be anticipating your death. And that can look a lot of different ways. We're going to talk about some ways to be resilient in the face of that. Again, I have mentioned this idea of like the body betraying you. There's a super good talk, TED talk on ageism by Ashton Applewhite. If you Google ageism, it's called Let's End Ageism. It's super powerful. It's 11 minutes long. I use it in all the classes that I teach at the counseling program. She talks about like our bodies aren't really betraying us. Like this is what they were meant to do. We're born to die, right? That's what our bodies are designed to do. We're programmed that we have an end point. And so they're kind of doing what they're supposed to do. But of course, when it's happening to us in our bodies, especially if it's out of order, like it's, you know, we're having severe arthritis at 50 versus 75, 85, right? So kind of like if it feels out of time, out of the timeline, it can feel like your body's betraying you. And then of course, the terminal illness, like you might have some unfinished business in yourself or with others. And then as others are experiencing you or you're experiencing someone else having a terminal illness, there is also that anticipatory grief, right? Of like, mom has cancer. We kind of got a timeline from the doctor. We kind of know where this is headed. And then you kind of like grieve in advance of that, as you can see kind of the timeline continuing on. And then maybe, you know, having some unfinished business as well. And that's really where we have an opportunity potentially to come together and maybe air some of that unfinished business and maybe not necessarily reconcile, but maybe kind of come to an understanding. That's a whole other topic. So resilience. Okay, so there's been a little bit of a beginning, right? Talking about resilience there. We're going to talk a little bit more about it here. So again, if you were with us last time, you might have heard some of this. Okay, this is where you come in if you would like to. What do you think of when you hear the word resilience? Is there a phrase? Is there a practice? Is there a, you know, what comes to mind when you hear the word resilience? Or in this case, you read the word resilience. Mental strength. Yeah, coping strategies. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. Belief. Sure. Yeah, for some that might be a belief in a higher power or a deity or a belief in yourself. Yeah, for sure. Great. Yeah. Love that. Oh, I've never really interacted with a Q&A box. Yeah, I answered that live. Oh, it's fun to check stuff off. Oh, look at that. I can mark done. Oh, that's amazing. Anyway, yeah, so resilience, it's pretty broad, right? And it's also like relatively subjective because it means different things to different people. You know, sometimes resilience means getting out of bed even when you don't really want to. So it's a lot of different things. Thank you for sharing that. So the good news is resilience is available to everyone. As I mentioned earlier, because I couldn't remember if I had a slide on this, it's not a distinct personality trait, right? It's not you're born with it or you don't. It's really about actions, behaviors, thoughts that people at any age, there's not a cutoff point, folks. We can learn and develop resilience. So likely everyone on this, this webinar today or watching it down the road, we've all been through some stuff. And so we already have the underpinnings of resilience. It's a muscle, right? We need to cultivate, we need to exercise, we need to take time and intentionality to develop. One example, we talked about this ad nauseum last time, was, kind of in the context of retirement, it can feel like an opportunity or a threat, to your personhood, to your time, to what's ahead. And so a resilient mindset toward that would see it as an opportunity. I think the balance is that resilience isn't necessarily like rose-colored glasses and positivity despite it all. It's not to dismiss, right? Because sometimes rose-colored glasses and like, well, look on the bright side. It's not what I'm saying. It's about being able to have an open, flexible mindset. Doesn't necessarily always look like positivity. It's a unique combination of these internal factors and external factors. So positive attitude, coping skills, healthy thinking, choosing to engage in hobbies, maintaining those relationships through a strong support system, and making use of resources available. So these are really like when we're thinking about the hands-on stuff we can do to cultivate resilience, here is where the rubber meets the road. So that internal aspect, having a positive attitude, having that flexibility, being open to new experiences, trying new things, right? Maybe joining a book club wasn't something you wanted to do when you were younger, and now you're open to it, right? It's another way to connect with people. It's maybe having a sense of more optimism, being adaptable. Can you stay calm in stressful situations? Can you roll with the punches, exert control where you can and let go, release when you can't? Because we know when there's chronic and terminal illness, sometimes we can exert control, right? We have the ability to take our medicines. We also can't super duper control exactly how well those medicines work against the cancer, right? That isn't a choice we can make. We choose whether or not to take the medication, but whether or not it's successful is left a little bit to our bodies and to the medication. That other internal factor, effective coping skills, right? So mindfulness, staying in the present moment versus getting anxious about the future. Whew, easier said than done. Easier said than done. Some of the exercises I really like about this are square breathing. So that's where you breathe in for 4, a count of 4, hold it for 4, exhale for a count of 4, and hold it for 4. So we know from research and brain scans, breathing changes our brain and it grounds our bodies. So when we're really stressed and feeling really anxious, we're not super able to be in the present moment because we literally aren't in the present moment. We're thinking about the future. And so breathing can really help us get back into our bodies. Doing a 5 senses exercise. So looking around the room, naming each sense in something you see, hear, taste, smell, see, hear, taste, smell, touch, right? That helps us get into the present moment too and helps us cope with where we are in the moment. There's a lot of really great mindfulness apps too that are free that can help you do mindfulness exercises. Meditation doesn't mean your brain is, wiped clean and it's just like completely empty and you're not thinking about anything. That is not an attainable goal. So it's moments of quiet, of stillness. Healthy thinking involves creativity. Understanding that even problem solving, brainstorming, flexibility involves creativity. Paying attention to negative thought patterns. I love this idea of don't believe everything you think, because sometimes our brains trick us. Sometimes they deceive us. I have a lot of clients. I'm a therapist. I didn't even introduce myself in the slightest. I didn't introduce myself at all. Well, I should tell you a little bit about who I am. I will do it now. It's not too late. I need to add a slide. My name's Tamara. I'm a marriage and family therapist in Minnesota. I work with older adults, particularly, and their families, and I have for 10 years in private practice. And so anyway, there you go. So don't believe everything you think. So sometimes clients will talk about, well, depression is telling me why even get out of bed today? So sometimes our thought patterns kind of deceive us, and can inactivate us. And so kind of going like, how can I cultivate more healthy thinking? The last time I did this presentation about a year ago, and I had asked, about resilience, someone had said, growth is hopeful. She had mentioned, I plant a garden every year and seeing the flowers come up and seeing the vegetables grow, that growth is hopeful. And so there's this idea of post-traumatic growth. You've probably heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, right? There's also that of post-traumatic growth, which is really ultimately resilience in the face of traumatic situations. And so growth is hopeful, right? There is a possibility to have some resilience, some bouncing back, despite bad things that have happened in our lives. Now we get to those external factors, right? So choosing to engage in hobbies, that's a choice, right? Nobody can force us really to go to the senior center, I don't think anybody's forcing you to be here, right? But you are choosing to be here, and that's brilliant. This is cultivating resilience. You being here right now is cultivating resilience. How awesome is that? So really just thinking about how we choose to spend our days and our time matters, right? We have limited time. That's a fact. There's only so many hours in a day. And so what brings you a sense of purpose? Thinking about, what fulfills you, what fills your cup. And then if you're living with chronic or terminal illness, it's really okay to grieve what you've lost. It's really okay to notice and lament, I can't golf because I have Parkinson's and I used to love to golf. Yeah, absolutely. It's not here to say we're saying it's okay to grieve what you've lost or what's changed, because sometimes change is loss. And so, when you're choosing to engage in hobbies, sometimes it's making goals, right? It's saying, I don't want to join 3 book clubs that I've been invited to join, but I'm going to try to join one, and I'm going to try to go monthly. I'm going to try to read the book. I'm a part of a book club and we're a no shame book club. If you don't read the book, that's okay. Come discuss it anyway. Come discuss the concepts or just come be together, right? There's ways to just be together too. Maintaining relationships through a strong support system. So prioritizing your relationships, right? Investing in the people around you and them investing in you too. Support systems are so important. It's one of the first questions I ask any new client I start working with. Tell me about your support system. Connecting with people who understand you and what you're experiencing, people that you can trust. We know that we can feel connected to people who aren't going through exactly the same thing that we are. And there's a powerful experience in being in community with people who are. And so, yeah, a lot of times people have their group of friends, and then sometimes they join a breast cancer support group because that is a community where people are going through the same experience. But it doesn't mean you don't have your, friend group anymore. But the ability to be able to trust and feel like you can invest and be yourself. Noticing we can feel like isolating ourselves when we're stressed and in pain. So kind of that balance, right? It's important to accept help and support. Knowing yourself and what feels comfortable, and knowing when you're at a point where you might feel kind of specifically isolated, reaching out for help or accepting help. Because a lot of times we have people offering us help, we just don't say yes. And it might be different in New York than it is in Minnesota, but we've got this passive aggression stuff, and I don't want to be a burden, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know what? We have community around us to support each other. We are community with other people because we want to support other people. And so it's this mutual benefit of relying on each other, right? And so breaking out of that mindset of I don't want to be a burden. Well, sometimes we need something from someone, and it's having the right people around who are able to support us. Or joining a support group, right? Or starting a support group. I had a client who cared for her husband who died of Alzheimer's. And she took her time. I believe it was like a year and a half later, because some groups have rules about how soon after a loss you can start a support group. But she started leading a support group for the Alzheimer's Association, and she found it to be really, really powerful and meaningful to her. So that was a way for her to give back and not be isolated, right? Lots of ways. I saw a question come through and I'm so tempted. I'm going to hold them until the end though. And then finally, making use of the resources that are available to you. So noticing what's available in your community, right? What's right in your neighborhood, essentially, or what's available virtually, because we are each other's community this morning. I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You are somewhere in New York, most likely, right? But we are community for each other this morning, and that's beautiful. And so, kind of maybe broadening what you think of as community sometimes too. Thinking about, are you up to date on your healthcare? Are there some appointments you've been dragging your feet on doing? Right? It's hard to receive bad news, but it's also good to be informed of what's going on. Are you managing your chronic illnesses? Right? Are you adequately managing your diabetes, etc.? And then preparing and planning ahead, right? Making some decisions, preparing, thinking, can I age in this house? My house, I won't be able to age in. It's a 1.5 story. The bathroom's upstairs. There are stairs that I mentioned earlier, my little free stair stepper. I won't be able to age in this house. There's nowhere to put a bathroom. And so I know that. And theoretically, I have a while before I need to be concerned about that. But it's just something for me to keep in mind because I really love this little house. So here's a Q&A opportunity for you, or an A opportunity for you. What have you done to cultivate resilience as you age? Have you joined something? Have you reached out to friends, family? You seen a therapist? What have you done to cultivate resilience as you age? Because this will give each other some ideas too. Therapy, yes. I'm a little biased because I'm a therapist. Bravo. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Therapy is available for everyone, and you don't have to be mentally ill or whatever stigma, all of the things. You don't have to be at death's door to say, I really want some help, right? Absolutely. Reaching out for help. I have clients who are doing pretty great and they just love having a non-biased, neutral person to bounce ideas off of. Awesome, right? Awesome. Oh, I like this one too. Seeking out better medical providers. I love that. I haven't heard that before in this context. I love that. Yes, absolutely. If you have a medical provider who kind of stinks or like isn't listening to you or isn't, answering your questions or providing you the care that you need, my friends, find someone else. Ask around, ask your friends who they see, ask in your community, go on the Google, right? Seek out someone else because there are people that can be more helpful and validating and thorough. You deserve thorough care. Taking care of finances, signing an advance directive. Oh my gosh, I didn't send these slides ahead of time, but it's like you read it. I'm going to talk about planning for end of life in a couple of slides here. Brilliant. Brilliant. Yes. Taking care of finances, signing an advance directive. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Asking for help from my friends and my partner and getting used to that. Yes. Yes. I don't know about you. And I'm not a person who's like, I don't want to be a burden. I just I don't like to admit that I have a need. I don't like to admit that. And so I can ask for the hey, can you help me carry this thing that is heavy? But it's hard for me sometimes to ask for the emotional support that I need, right? So knowing the differences. Oh, okay, yes. Great comment about therapy. No, it isn't available to everyone. You're right. You still need to have insurance. And even if you have insurance, you're still limited to a small pool of providers. Yes, it definitely depends on your finances and your insurance. Some therapists are private pay. Some have a sliding scale. If you're looking for a resource for low cost therapy, I am not going to remember the exact website address, but if you Google Open Path, OpenPath, That is a directory of therapists with reduced fees. And I'm not sure if this is something that is in New York. We have available in Minneapolis. We have a free clinic that is just 100% free, no questions asked, and you can do ongoing therapy there. And so, yes, absolutely, there are some barriers to getting therapy for sure. And then finding a provider that you resonate with, which I would also say similar to the, finding better medical providers. If you start with a therapist and you don't vibe, you don't jive, find a new one. It's a really intimate conversation to have, super intimate conversation and relationship. And so, yeah, absolutely. Oh, and Sarah's going to put some resources in the chat. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks everyone for being part of that discussion. I love it. I love it. Oh, thanks, Sarah. Open Path Collective. Thank you. Awesome. I love that. Journaling. Yes. Oh, it's so powerful to get. I just journaled last night. And get our thoughts that are swirling around sometimes and can feel just chaotic or just overwhelming and heavy. And I gotta remember, getting them out of our systems can be so powerful. Absolutely. Journaling is awesome. Thank you. I have no idea how many slides I have left, so I'm going to keep going. So some strategies, in addition to the 6 that we already talked about, in terms of resilience strategies. Prepare. See, I told you, it's like you saw what's going to come up here. We're all going to die, folks. You might go that and roll your eyes and be like, well, yeah. But like, we don't talk about that enough at any age. I have an advanced care plan myself. I'm 36 years old. I am healthy, right? And so it says full code, do all the stuff, unless like I'm brain dead or like there's no hope of recovery. And so what I have on my advanced care directive is different than what is going to be down the road. But acknowledging like anything can happen. So making those decisions, right? Outlining those documents, talking to our families about what we want and what we don't want, getting care for our physical health. This was an interesting statistic that I had found that was understandable and sort of disturbing. So this was for the age group 18 to 64 in particular, but a third of them decided to forego or delay medical care in the early months of the pandemic. Sometimes even when it was necessary, right? So I know places kind of shut down like the elective procedures and stuff, so you didn't really have a choice. But seeking care for mental health. Oh, that's so funny. I got to write down. I have a note for myself in here to include some stats about mental health in older adults, and then I didn't, because I didn't highlight it for myself to come back to. Seeking the care that you need from someone who can support you. I would argue that, people who work with young children, that's a specialty people need to have special training in. I would argue that older adults is a specialty people need to have special training in. And so if you see a therapist who says, yeah, I work with kids, they might not be the best fit for working with you as an older adult, because that's not their area of expertise. That's not their training. I don't work with kids. My youngest is 19, and that's only because he's grieving. So like it still falls into my wheelhouse. But otherwise, like that's my area of expertise. And so seeking care for mental health, the stigma of mental health and mental health care is coming down slowly but surely. And so being able to go, I don't feel great and I can feel better. Really, that's all it takes. It doesn't have to, you don't have to say like, I think I have clinical depression. Just, I want to feel better than this. That's what therapy can help with. I see Sarah put another resource in the chat. Thank you so much for that, Sarah. Building your support system is another strategy for cultivating resilience. So adult children, I am just delighted. Like it's just how this all pans out. You've got a webinar, or I don't know what format it's in. You've got a talk coming up later this week about solo aging. Awesome. Because sometimes people don't have adult children. I don't have children. And so I have to consider how I'm going to age and who's going to support me. The good news is I have neighbors. I have everyone else on this list, right? I have neighbors, friends, building your support system, former coworkers, right? People you've stayed in touch with. Do you have nieces, nephews, grandchildren? And then of course, paid support, getting in-home care, or there's non-medical home care, there's medical home care, ways that you can get support that are outside of just, people in your network. getting your ducks in a row, right? Documenting your wishes. They can only be carried out if people know what you want, right? So documenting your wishes, your plans, having a will, having a living will, an advanced care plan. I am talking about emotions of advanced care planning next month, so I'm not going to get into that nitty gritty today. Super important though, depending on your level of illness, having a POLST, which is a provider's orders for life-sustaining treatment. It essentially takes your advanced care plan and makes it doctor's orders. And then when you're thinking about getting your ducks in a row, where do you want to live? Right? What is the location you want to live in? Do you want to age in place? Is your house conducive to doing so? You know, thinking about like, are all of your resources on one floor? Or if not, can you get, you know, one of those that goes up the stairs? Can you get on and off of it, right? And so thinking about any changes you might need to make to your location as part of getting your ducks in a row and living with resilience with chronic and terminal illness. Thinking about different levels of care that you might need depending on what your chronic or terminal illness is, you know, considering residential long-term care, of which these are a variety of the types of long-term care, right? So independent living, where people aren't receiving services, but they're among people in your age group. Assisted living, where you can add on some services, but you're mostly on your own. You can bring in external services too. Skilled nursing care, that's really like the higher level of care where you have, you know, maybe you need the Hoyer lift to get you in and out of bed, or you need catheterization or things like that. And then memory care for folks that are cognitively declining and needing that higher level of care. That's the quickest way I've ever gone through RLTC options. Palliative care. So when you are living with a chronic illness, you can get a team-based approach. It's hospital-based, but also can come to you. And so having a palliative care team, or hospice care, of course, at end of life. Hospice applies. You need to be certified as having 6 months or less to live if your disease process took its natural course. A lot of people don't realize that it's 6 months and they think like, well, it's in the last week. No, it's the last 6 months. And then when you get toward the end of that 6 months, if you're still alive, they'll reassess and recertify you for another 6 months. Sometimes people get on hospice and they improve. And so then you graduate from hospice, which is a really confusing term for people, but that's the term they use. And then you don't receive those services and you can come back on, right? So receiving the care that you need based on what you've got going on, being open to this support, right? Which is usually part of the challenge, is being open to this support. Preparing for your death. You know, thinking through and deciding what life-saving treatments you do or do not want, communicating with people about that, planning your funeral, right? All of these things, when we can plan these for ourselves, we give our kids and those around us a gift. We give them a gift when we tell them what we want and what we don't want, so they don't have to guess. And they don't have to make a bunch of decisions when they're grieving, right? So when we go, well, XYZ is what mom wants, that's what we're going to do, right? Or she's already planned her funeral, she's already paid for it. Amazing. Estate planning, right? Getting your ducks in a row, getting your stuff into a trust, whatever's appropriate in your situation, paring down. Whatever you don't get rid of, your family or loved ones will have to, right? So we give our community or our children a gift when we get rid of items that are in our houses that we don't need anymore. That is really a gift. Yeah, working on an ethical will. Absolutely. Absolutely. There are so many ways that we can prepare. So many ways that we can prepare. Preparing your family for your death, talking about it. Yes, there are always more pleasant things to talk about, right? There's this really beautiful graphic novel memoir deal by Roz Chast called Isn't There Something More Pleasant to Talk About? Can we talk about something more pleasant? I point over there because it's on my bookshelf. Yes, there's always something more pleasant to talk about, but this is really important, and it's part of resilience is preparation. So hopefully preparing means your family won't be surprised by your decisions and wishes, right? Oh yes, okay, perfect. I have one slide left so I can tell you this brief story. So I went through advanced care planning with my folks who are in their 60s and 70s a couple years ago. And you know, we got all our ducks in a row, whatever. And I read my dad's advanced care plan, and it said he didn't want to die at home. And I was like, that's kind of strange. And I talked to my mom. She's like, oh, I don't know. I should have asked him about it. Well, I asked him about it the other night. We were able to, it's a dinner time conversation with someone like me, because this is what I talk about all day. I said, Dad, you know, your advanced care plan, it said you didn't want to die at home. Can you tell me more about that? Such a therapist question. Can you tell me more about that? And he's like, well, yeah, I don't want to be a burden. And I said, oh, not a problem. We will have hospice care. Okay. I had no idea how to make meaning of his wish. And so I'm so glad that I asked, because otherwise we maybe would have, you know, down the road, he'd be in a hospital. No, that's not really what he wants. And he's a retired farmer, and he had on there that he wanted to be embalmed and buried. And I said, Dad, you know, the other question here, you said you wanted to be embalmed and buried. Can you tell me more about that? And he said, well, you know, I want to be in the ground, you know, for the worms. And I said, oh, okay. Well, if you're embalmed and buried, they're not really going to have a very easy time getting to you, those worms. And so what I'm hearing is you actually want a pretty natural burial. And he said, well, whatever, so the worms. And I was like, okay. So I'm like, so what I'm hearing is hospice and a natural burial, which is not what he had on his advanced care plan. And so we have to talk about it too. It's not just completing this document and shoving it in a manila folder in a locked filing cabinet in a locked room, right? It's talking about it. So really it's all saying like ways to prepare, ways to maintain your health as best you can, right? All that to say, God, time flies. You are and can be resilient. You already possess resilient qualities, and you can grow and cultivate resilience. So I really hope that you hear this message as hopeful, because it is, right? Resilience is available to everyone. It's available to you. You are already doing it. And so just continuing to cultivate that. And hopefully there are some key takeaways from today, even if it's just validating what you're already doing, because you're probably already doing a bunch of these things. You're not coming on here to find out like earth-shattering new information. It's stuff you're hopefully already doing. So it is hopeful. It is a hopeful message. You are and can be resilient. I'll send Sarah a copy of these slides as well. These are some of the resources that I talked about. So you have access to them too. And then these are some options for end-of-life documentation. We'll talk more in the next presentation in May. So thank you. Gosh, this time always flies so fast.
Thank you so much. We do have some questions, so if you want to, I can read them to you if that's helpful.
Oh, sure.
Thank you so much. This was really helpful. And yes, I will be sure to send the slides so everyone can have those resources. Someone asked, how do you recommend helping someone find balance who may be too far in one direction? So too deep into grief, or maybe too positive, not accepting the situation?
Yeah, okay, got it. Well, it sounds like to me the question is about us helping someone else, not someone kind of a hypothetical for asking for a friend, right? But for themselves. Yeah, you know, I think this is an area that's particularly tricky because it's a little subjective as well. And so I think this is not going to be a short answer. It's a little tricky because what does it mean to be too deep in grief? And grief and loss is an area that I get really nerdy about and a bit defensive, because sometimes we can kind of judge or quantify or qualify someone else's expressions of grief as they're grieving too much or they're not grieving enough. And really, there's so many ways of grieving. It's super subjective. And so being aware that what you see might not be the entire story about how they're doing. And so if they are expressively grieving a lot, that might be right for them. Or too far in the other direction. I think sometimes it's being supportive and being curious, right? And asking questions about how they're doing. And if you know something happened recently, asking about like, how is it going with this thing? And understanding also this balance of like, people don't have to tell us the truth. People don't have to be vulnerable. People don't have to accept our help. It's hard. This is probably not the answer you thought you were going to receive. I do hope it is in some way helpful. But I think there's it's a very subjective experience. And so you know, kind of, we can offer our support, and whether or not people take us up on it is entirely up to them. And just understanding the nuance of how people handle situations, and that leaving room for you to have nuance too is something that we do when we leave room for other people to have nuance in their own particular experiences too. I think there's an answer in there.
Yeah, no, but I feel like this ties back to, I remember in your retirement presentation, we had talked about being concerned of if you are a caregiver or a child of someone who's going through retirement and you feel like they might not be acting the way they should be acting, that you had a very similar answer where you were like, be curious, but not judgmental, because we don't really know exactly what's going on. So I feel like that's similar, where it's like we might think someone might be not handling something well, but that's not really our place to say. I feel like is kind of what I understand being concerned. I think that comes from a place of genuine, love and hope, wanting to help someone. But I think what I'm getting is it's like be supportive and understanding without being judgmental if they're to something. Right?
Yeah. Okay. I think we talked about like compassionate curiosity last time.
Yes,
maybe.
yes.
And we can offer care, right? We can offer like, can I help you find a therapist? Can I help you find a resource? Can I, mow your lawn? Like, there are ways of offering help, and people have a right to say yes or no to them.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so there's one more question. Are there any recommendations for someone to learn how to generally handle accepting death outside of plans, financials? I imagine it's like having them accept death in like a concept. And I'm sure that that's also not a quick answer, but
none of my answers are ever quick. You'll learn. None of them are ever quick. Oh, that's such a brilliant question. And it's also just like, my answer is like, a question is like, what does it mean to accept death? But this is not a death cafe where that's just what we're talking about for an hour or two. So, actually, I love how like sometimes the brain, if you have access to a death cafe, it might sound like a strange thing, but it's a discussion group. If you have access to a death cafe in your community or a virtual one, that could be really helpful. And so what they are, it's actually like an organized thing. Someone facilitates a conversation. It's usually pretty open-ended about death and dying. And so like, I think sometimes people need some exposure to it, right? Dialogue, because we are such a death-denying society. Even to the point where I make a point of saying died and not passed away, because I think we just need to like take some of the thorns out of the word death. And so, yeah, I think that if you want a book recommendation, he is 91 and amazing. It is called Staring at the Sun. It is by a psychiatrist therapist. His name is Irvin Yalom. That is all about death anxiety. And so he really looks at like, death anxiety as being like the root of, he would say, most things. And so really kind of like that existential anxiety, existential dread. So that is one of his like main books about existential anxiety and death anxiety. That could be helpful. And then also I would engage with the book. It's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's original research that she did. You're probably familiar with the stages of grief. Don't even get me started. But they were her research was on people who were dying. And so when you look at the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, she actually formulated that on her research with people who were dying, not people who were grieving. So don't even get me started. But if they're useful for you, go for it. So her original research was on people who are dying. And so her book On Death and Dying might be another place to start, because that can kind of help you see her framework from that lens too. Yeah, I guess those would be the things that I would think of. Yeah.
I've never heard of a death cafe. I find that really fascinating. And I think that that's also a great way of building resilience, almost like proactively.
Yes.
It's kind of like learning, like you said, like learning how to like just maybe a little exposure around the idea, not right when you're faced with it, maybe. I mean, I know we don't really have any control over that, but it's just kind of like you said, getting used to it in small bits might just kind of help the whole process in general. So that's interesting. I'm going to have to look that up.
Oh yeah.
I also wanted to, just because you've been so great at giving some resources and recommendations, I know you mentioned some mindfulness apps. Do you have any that you recommend that we can share with the group, if somebody wants to start
Yeah.
kind of breathing or anxiety meditation, anything like that?
Yes, one of them is called Insight Timer. That is the one that I use that I particularly like. And then there is an app called Calm. I think that's a paid, I think there's a free version and maybe like a paid subscription too, because everything has something you can pay for. But Insight Timer is the one I like in particular.
Actually, I've used that one as well, so I can also recommend that. So I'm just going to put those in the chat in case anybody wants to grab at that. I did put the Open Path Collective in there, so hopefully there can be some, if anybody's interested in therapy and wants to look at kind of lower costs, there is that low cost therapy link that I put in as well. We are also in June, we should, I'm just confirming it, but we should be having someone from the Cerebral mental health app also coming to chat. So that can be, there's resources like Cerebral, and I think there's a few other as well that are virtual, that I think are slightly more affordable, or at least accessible if you don't have insurance. So there hopefully will be someone chatting later in June about that. So hopefully we can kind of continue finding resources for everybody if that's what they're interested in. But yeah, I think that's it. Just a couple Q&As in here, just saying great job and thank you. So definitely take all that. You did a wonderful job. And yeah, like you said too, you're going to be back in May to chat about the emotions of advanced care planning. So if anybody wants to sign up for that, it's already on the event page. So you can register in advance. And yeah, I know we're just about wrapping up. We're going to pass it on for Circle of Care chat. But if anybody has any other questions for Tamara, feel free to pop them in. But in the meantime, thank you so much for doing this. And we just really love having you here and appreciate you chatting about these difficult topics, but making it very helpful for all of us, myself included. I'm taking notes. So
yeah, you're so welcome.
You.
It's a wonderful time. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll see you back in May. And I'm going to pass it on. I see Kiara's in here. Hi, Kiara. Thank you. I did let everyone know that Circle of Care chat's coming. So if anybody has any questions for Circle of Care, feel free to pop them in the Q&A and I'll just pass it off to Kiara to chat.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kiara Soto. I am an intake care consultant at PSS Circle of Care, and we are a caregivers program that offers free supportive services to caregivers who are caring for a loved one who is chronically ill, suffering from memory loss or dementia. And these services include counseling, support groups, educational trainings, respite care, advocacy. We also provide assistance with long-term care planning. So if you're interested and would like to find out more about our program, you can give us a call at 866-665-1713, or you can also visit our website at pssusa.org. Thank you for your time, and I will also be placing our information in the chat. In case you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Oh, I did pop the hotline in there. Sorry, I jumped the gun there.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you.
Feel free to put all the info. Yeah. Definitely check out the Circle of Care program. It's really wonderful for caregivers. We talk a lot in these webinars about the importance of taking care of yourself just as much as you're taking care of others. And this is a really great resource for you. So if you're interested, definitely reach out with any questions or comments, anything you'd like. Kara's going to just put some info in there. I did put the website in there as well. And if you have any questions that pop up right now, feel free. I'll give everyone a second. And what else was I going to say about Circle of Care? Oh, speaking of caregivers, we do have that Zumba class tomorrow for caregivers. So speaking of caregivers, you might see Tamara and I in there too, just Zumbaing it up.
It's true.
My computer's completely frozen. It's not letting me open the Zoom.
Oh no, it's okay. I'll put the I put the hotline in there, and I'm gonna put the website again so you can see it. Of course, no worries. Listen, the tech's real. Yeah. Also, just to remind, I feel like I ask this every time, but just so I can put it in the chat, is the hotline 24 hours? Or I should say, when is the office open so people know when to reach them?
We're open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Awesome. Okay, I'm just going to put that in there so that we have it, just so you know when you can reach someone. And I don't think we have any particular questions about Circle of Care, so I think we're good. But no, you're good. Everything's in there. We have the, if you have any questions that come up later, you can reach out to Circle of Care on the website. Amazing. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Have a beautiful week. Hopefully the weather stays nice for everyone wherever you are. And yeah, we'll see you. We have tons of stuff this week, so hopefully we'll see you all then. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.